The hum of the engines filled the cabin as she sat quietly in seat 8A, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Outside, the morning sky was soft and endless, the kind of blue that hides everything beneath it. To anyone watching, she looked like just another passenger, calm, polite, lost in thought. No one knew that the silence around her was heavier than it looked. The plane had taken off from a small coastal city, bound for a military base hundreds of miles away. Most of the passengers were civilians talking softly, flipping through magazines or dozing off. But she wasn't like the others. She had boarded last, wearing a plain jacket and carrying nothing but a small brown backpack. The flight attendants noticed her calmness, not nervous, not excited, just watchful. At 30,000 feet, the seatbelt sign switched off. A few people stretched their legs, some ordered drinks. She just looked out the window, watching the sunlight flash across the wings. There was something in her eyes, something quiet but sharp, like she was listening to a sound no one else could hear. Then, far below, the calm began to break. The pilot's voice came on the intercom, light and casual at first. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing some radio issues, nothing to worry about." The passengers barely reacted, but she lifted her head immediately. Her eyes flicked toward the cockpit door, then back to the sky outside. She knew that tone, controlled, calm, but hiding tension. Minutes passed. The plane continued its path, but she could sense something wrong. She had once known that kind of silence, the one that comes before a radio call turns into a distress signal. Suddenly, a faint vibration ran through the cabin. It wasn't turbulence. It was the deep, distant rumble of jet engines outside. She turned her head and caught sight of them. 2 gray dots moving fast toward the plane's side. F-16s, a few passengers gasped, pointing toward the window. The pilot's voice came again, this time strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We're in contact with Air Command. Everything is fine," but she knew it wasn't fine. Fighter jets don't just appear out of nowhere for a routine malfunction. The passengers started whispering, anxious voices rising. She stayed silent, her mind racing. Through the glass, she could see the F-16s flying parallel to the plane, their canopies glinting in the sun. She could almost feel the nervous energy of the pilots inside, young, trained, but uncertain. Something was wrong up there, and something was very wrong down here. Then, through the cabin window, a strange moment unfolded. One of the F-16s tilted slightly, its wing dipping toward the passenger jet. A flare of light blinked from its side. It wasn't a threat, it was a signal. A coded gesture, one that she recognized instantly. Her pulse quickened. Years ago, she had been on the other side of that signal, in another sky, another time. She closed her eyes for a second, memories flashing. The roar of engines, the static-filled radio, the commander's voice calling her name over the headset. But she wasn't her anymore, not the pilot they once knew. She had buried that identity long ago, and yet fate had a strange sense of timing. The captain's voice came again, louder now. "We've received an emergency instruction to change course. Please stay seated." The cabin lights flickered. The passengers clutched their armrests, eyes darting to the windows. The F-16s had moved closer, dangerously close. She leaned forward, her calm finally breaking. She knew this pattern, this formation. They weren't attacking. They were protecting or preparing for something worse. And then, in a moment that made her blood run cold, she heard it. Through the muffled roar of the engines and the murmurs of frightened passengers, a faint but clear voice came through the cabin speakers, an open radio transmission that had bled into the flight's frequency. "Eagle Flight, we've lost contact." "Fuel low, we can't hold much longer." The voice was raw, panicked. A young F-16 pilot calling for help. The flight attendants froze, unsure of what was happening. Some passengers started praying quietly. She felt her hands tremble. That voice. It was a tone she'd trained dozens of pilots to avoid. Panic meant loss of control, and before she could stop herself, the words slipped from her lips. Quiet, instinctive, like muscle memory. "Hold your altitude. Don't dive yet." The passenger beside her turned, startled. "What did you say?" But she wasn't hearing him anymore. Her mind had shifted, calculating distances, wind speeds, and possible rescue windows. Then came the rumble, a deeper, heavier than the F-16s. The sound of an A-10 Thunderbolt tearing through the clouds. The Warthog. Slow, fierce, unmistakable. The entire cabin trembled as the sound grew louder. The young F-16 pilot's desperate voice came again, this time filled with relief. "Copy that. The A-10's here," she exhaled, eyes glistening. She had flown beside that very sound once, back when her name still meant something in the sky. But none of the passengers knew that. To them, she was just a quiet woman on a plane. Only the heavens knew that. Years ago, she had been the one they once called Eagle One, and today, fate had placed her back in the sky, just as the world below was about to remember her name. The cabin was filled with whispers now. Frightened, confused voices mixing with the heavy hum of the engines. The passengers looked at each other for answers, but no one had any. Outside, the two F-16s were still locked beside the airliner, their sleek bodies flashing silver in the sun. The A-10 had joined them, its massive shape cutting through the clouds like a guardian. But she wasn't looking at the fear around her anymore. Her focus was far beyond that window. Her heartbeat had slowed, her breath steady. That old rhythm, the one she thought she'd left behind years ago, had returned. The rhythm of the sky. The captain came over the intercom again, his voice strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, please stay calm. We're cooperating with Air Command. There's no immediate danger." She knew that tone too. Calm words masking rising panic. Civilian pilots rarely face this kind of situation, and from the pattern of the escorts she could tell something larger was unfolding. Not just a technical issue. Outside, one of the F-16s wobbled slightly, banking lower. She leaned close to the window, her eyes narrowing. The formation wasn't normal. It looked like one of the fighter pilots was struggling to keep level, maybe losing fuel or control. Her fingers twitched unconsciously, as if searching for an invisible joystick. She wanted to reach out to speak, to guide them, but she couldn't. Not yet. She wasn't part of that world anymore. Then, through the static of the cabin speakers, the radio crackled again. A broken voice bled through. "Eagle Flight. This is Viper 2, low on fuel. Controls unstable. Requesting assist." Her eyes widened. That call sign, Viper 2. She remembered it. The voice belonged to a young trainee she'd once mentored years ago. Back when she was still flying combat missions, he had been barely 20, too eager. Always overcorrecting in flight drills. She had scolded him for that once. And now, here he was, flying over the same sky, his voice trembling over an open emergency frequency. The cabin went silent. The passengers didn't understand what they were hearing, but she did. Every word cut through her like a blade. Then came another voice over the radio, one filled with command and control. "All units maintain distance from civilian aircraft. A-10 will handle coverage. Repeat, hold formation." Her pulse quickened. They were running an aerial emergency close to the passenger plane, and the civilian aircraft was right in the center of it. That meant one wrong move could turn this into a disaster. She unbuckled her seatbelt. The man beside her gasped. "Ma'am, where are you going?" "I need to talk to the captain," she said quietly. He blinked. "They said stay seated." But she was already moving down the aisle. Her steps were calm, precise, the kind that come from years of walking through chaos. The flight attendants tried to stop her. "Ma'am, please, you can't go near the cockpit." "I used to fly with them," she said simply, her voice low but steady. Something in her tone, the certainty, the quiet authority, made them pause. She showed them a small tag she still carried, worn and faded. It wasn't much, but the golden wings on it spoke volumes. After a moment of hesitation, one of the attendants nodded. "All right, but please be careful." She pushed forward and reached the cockpit door. The co-pilot cracked it open, slightly alarmed. "You can't be here." "I know what's happening outside," she said quickly. "You've got an F-16 losing stability near your airspace. If he tilts wrong, he'll collide with you within seconds." The captain turned, startled. "How do you know that?" "Because I trained him," she replied softly. The cockpit went silent. The captain stared, unsure whether to believe her. But then another transmission cut through, loud and urgent. "Viper 2 losing altitude fast." "I can't hold her steady." Without thinking, she grabbed the radio headset. The captain hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Her voice came through the open channel, calm, commanding, and unmistakably familiar. "Viper 2, this is Eagle 1, listen to me." There was a long pause on the radio. Then came the shocked reply, "Eagle 1? Ma'am, is that you?" "Yes," she said. Focus on my voice. Check your right stabilizer trim. Drop it by 3 degrees. Don't fight it. Let the drag do the work. In the cabin, passengers had no idea who was talking or what was happening, but the fighter pilots outside did. The name Eagle One wasn't just a call sign, it was legend. She continued, her tone like a steady heartbeat. Ease your throttle, Viper 2. You're too close to the civilian wing. Pull back and align with the A-10's tail shadow. That's your safe corridor. Through the window, she could see it happen. The faltering F-16 steadying itself, slowly aligning behind the A-10 as her voice guided him. The A-10 pilot came over the radio, relief clear in his tone. Eagle One, this is Thunder Lead. You just saved that kid's jet. She smiled faintly. Old habits die hard. Inside the cockpit, the captain and co-pilot exchanged stunned looks. You were really a pilot? One of them whispered. Once, she said quietly. And I guess I still am. Outside, the sky seemed calmer now. The F-16s regained formation, the A-10 circling protectively. She handed the headset back, her pulse finally slowing. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. There was a reason those fighters were here, and something told her this rescue was only the beginning. As she walked back to her seat, the captain called after her softly. Ma'am, Eagle One? She stopped, turned slightly and nodded once. That was a long time ago, she said. But in that moment, even the sky seemed to remember her name. The clouds outside had turned a darker shade of gray, thick and heavy like something was brewing beyond them. The airliner had leveled out again, but a strange kind of silence filled the cabin. Not fear this time, but awe. No one really understood what had just happened, but everyone had seen it. The fighter jet outside almost spinning out, regaining control the moment that quiet woman had spoken into the cockpit radio. She sat back in her seat now, staring out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. The name Eagle One still echoed in her mind. She hadn't heard it in years. Once that name had meant something. It had been the call sign that made enemy radars flicker and friendly units breathe easier. Now it was just a memory she thought she'd buried forever. But the sky, it seemed, had a way of calling her back. The captain came out of the cockpit for a moment. The flight attendants cleared a small space near the front, and he leaned down beside her seat. Ma'am, he said quietly, Command wants to know who you are. We've had 3 coded transmissions since your voice went over that frequency. She sighed. Tell them they already know, she replied. They just didn't expect me to be flying economy class. The captain looked stunned, then returned to the cockpit without another word. Outside, the escort had shifted. The A-10 now flew a few hundred meters below them. Like a guardian angel made of thunder, the F-16 stayed to the sides. Not in formation anymore, but in watch mode. Something about the change made her uneasy. This wasn't a standard rescue pattern anymore. This was surveillance. Someone was watching her. Minutes later, the cockpit door opened again, but this time the co-pilot's face was pale. Ma'am, Command has requested direct contact. They want to speak to you. Her eyes narrowed. On this channel? Yes, secure frequency. They sent the code Alpha Echo 1. Her chest tightened. That code hadn't been used since the final operation she led years ago. The one she thought had ended her career for good. Slowly, she stood up and followed him back into the cockpit. The pilot handed her the headset, his eyes wide with quiet respect. They're waiting. She put it on, her voice calm. This is Eagle One. Static crackled for a moment, then a deep voice came through. Eagle One, this is Command. You were never supposed to be airborne again. I didn't plan it either, she said dryly. But one of your rookies nearly fell out of the sky. A pause. Then the voice softened slightly. We know, you saved him. But we've got a problem. Your ID was flagged the moment you spoke. Someone on the ground wants to know why a classified pilot is listed as deceased in service and sitting on a commercial flight. She exhaled slowly, closing her eyes. So it had begun. I told them to erase my file, she said quietly. They didn't listen. The voice hesitated. You disappeared 5 years ago. Everyone believed you were gone. Where have you been? Somewhere quiet, she said. Somewhere no one calls me Eagle One. Another pause. Then the command tone returned. Listen carefully. The F-16s aren't the only ones in this airspace. We've got unauthorized radar contacts approaching from the north. They're unidentified, possible drones or rogue aircraft. You need to stay calm, and whatever happens, keep that plane steady. Her eyes flicked to the radar screen inside the cockpit. She could see them. 3 blips moving fast. Too fast for weather balloons or cargo crafts. The captain swallowed hard. What do we do? She leaned closer to the radio. Command, how far? 30 nautical miles and closing. Her mind began working instantly. Then you need to pull the escorts back, she said. They're too close to civilian range. If those unknowns engage, this plane will be in their crossfire. Negative, Command replied. We can't withdraw. Whatever they're tracking, it's after you. Her blood ran cold. After me? Yes, the system pinged your old transponder frequency, the one you wore on your last mission. It activated the moment you checked in at the airport. She froze. The pendant around her neck, small, metallic, something she'd kept only for sentiment, wasn't just jewelry. It was the tracker from her final sortie. She took it off slowly, staring at it. It looked harmless, but deep inside it was a microchip that should have been deactivated years ago. Someone had turned it back on. The captain watched as she clenched it in her fist. If they're tracking me, she said quietly, then it's not the plane they're after. It's me, Command's voice hardened. Then we'll divert the plane to safe airspace. The A-10 and F-16s will form a defensive wall. You stay inside and do not engage. She almost laughed under her breath. You forget who I am. A few seconds of silence. Then the voice replied softly, almost with respect. No, Eagle One. We remember exactly who you are. That's why we're worried. She took a deep breath and handed the headset back. The captain looked at her nervously. What are we supposed to tell the passengers? Tell them to keep calm, she said. They don't need to know they're flying through history. As she returned to her seat, the air outside shimmered with sunlight breaking through the clouds. The A-10's engines thundered below. The F-16 circled tighter, and she could feel it. The storm wasn't over. Somewhere in the distance, past the thin veil of clouds, something was coming closer, something that didn't belong to any known air force. And for the first time in years, she felt that old fire in her chest again, the kind that only lights up when the sky itself calls her name. She looked out the window, her reflection steady and unshaken. Let them come, she whispered. Eagle One still flies. The sky was no longer peaceful. The light outside the windows flickered between gold and gray as the clouds thickened, hiding the sun. The passengers could sense something was wrong, even though the crew kept their smiles frozen in place. The hum of the engines was steady, but the air around the plane felt charged like static before a storm. She sat quietly again, her mind replaying the words she'd just heard. It's after you. Those words from Command still echoed in her ears. She kept her gaze locked on the horizon where the unknown radar blips were moving closer. It had been years since she'd faced something like this, something unpredictable, unidentified, and dangerously close to the line between the known and the impossible. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We'll be experiencing a short course change due to airspace adjustments. She knew that meant they were being diverted, probably toward a restricted corridor where the escorts could defend the plane if the unknowns came too close. But that was risky. Civilian aircraft weren't designed to dodge anything. Through the window, she could see one of the F-16s flare its afterburners and shoot ahead. The A-10 tightened its circle below, moving slower but heavier, its engines rumbling like thunder rolling through the clouds. Then, through the static, the radio inside the cockpit cracked again. A sharp voice came through. Command, this is Thunderlead. Visual contact. 3 bogies inbound, low altitude, no transponder. Copy that. Another voice replied. Maintain formation. Protect the civilian. The airliner's passengers saw nothing but clouds, yet their ears picked up the faint sound of roaring engines outside. A few people gasped, craning their necks toward the windows. The woman, Eagle One, didn't move. She knew the pattern of that sound. It wasn't random turbulence. Someone was maneuvering out there. She leaned slightly to see through the side window, and then she saw it. 3 dark silhouettes breaking through the clouds, moving unnaturally fast, leaving no contrails behind. They weren't standard aircraft shapes. Too sharp, too quiet between bursts of speed. The captain whispered to her, "What are those?" She studied the movement. Not commercial, not ours. Maybe modified recon drones. Drones? This high? They're not here for sightseeing, she said quietly. Outside, one of the F-16s fired a flare, a defensive flash meant to warn the intruders to turn away. But the shapes didn't change direction. Instead, one of them tilted upward, rising sharply toward the passenger jet. Her instincts kicked in. They're testing your radar boundary. If they cross it, they'll trigger auto-defense protocol. Meaning the escorts will open fire. The captain froze, his knuckles white on the controls. We can't let that happen with civilians on board. Then keep this plane steady and don't panic, she said. They'll follow movement. She moved toward the front of the cockpit again, grabbing the spare headset. Command, this is Eagle 1. Give me direct frequency to Thunder Lead. There was a pause, then Command answered. Eagle 1, are you sure? I didn't come back to watch people die in the sky, she said. A moment later, Thunder Lead, the A-10 pilot, came on. Copy, Eagle 1. You're live on channel. Her voice was calm, sharp, the same tone that once guided a dozen pilots through storms and combat zones. Thunder, listen carefully. Don't fire yet. Force them to show formation. They're probing reaction time. Make them expose their intent. Copy that. Outside, the A-10 broke formation slightly, angling its nose downward in a mock dive, a warning maneuver. The F-16s fanned wider, creating a defensive arc around the airliner. The three unidentified crafts hesitated. Their movements wavered like they were scanning, deciding. Then one of them dropped altitude fast. Another shot upward. The third hovered near the edge of the formation, unnaturally still. She clenched her fists. That's not random. They're controlling in sync. Whoever's piloting them knows formation warfare, the captain whispered. You mean military? Worse, she said softly. Ex-military. Just then, Thunder Lead's voice cracked through again, tense. Eagle 1, they're locking laser range. That's targeting prep. Her heartbeat slowed. Years of training turned her fear into focus. Thunder, cut left. Vipers climb 20 degrees, cross-pattern Alpha 5. You'll confuse their lock. Roger. She watched through the window as the A-10 and F-16s moved exactly as she said, their formation twisting elegantly through the clouds. One of the unknown crafts broke formation. Its systems clearly disrupted. The passengers had no idea that just beyond the clouds, a silent battle of reflex and precision was unfolding, one mistake away from disaster. The captain stared at her in disbelief. You're commanding them. Old habits, she murmured, eyes still fixed on the radar. Then came command again, their tone sharper. Eagle 1, we've identified one of the incoming signatures. It matches a prototype you flew during your last mission, the one that vanished with you. Her stomach dropped. That's impossible. Those crafts were destroyed. Apparently not all of them, Command replied grimly. Someone rebuilt them, and they're hunting the person who knows how to stop them. For a moment she said nothing, just silence. The truth hit her harder than the roar of the engines. These weren't random attackers. They were ghosts from her own past, technology she helped design now turned against her. Outside, lightning streaked across the clouds, briefly illuminating the three intruders. Their bodies gleamed metallic gray, marked with a faded insignia she recognized immediately. Her voice broke the silence. They're mine, she said softly. Those machines. They were built under Project Stormglass. The captain turned, confused. What's that? She met his gaze, her eyes sharp but sorrowful. A project that was never supposed to fly. And before he could ask more, a bright flash lit up the sky. One of the unknown crafts had fired a warning shot. The escorts broke formation. The plane jolted violently. Passengers screamed. She braced herself against the wall, steadying her breath. They found me, she whispered. And they won't stop until I answer why I disappeared. The next moment, alarms began to sound. The A-10's transmission cut through, urgent. Eagle 1, we're hit. She looked out into the gray, her eyes fierce once more. Then it's time to finish what I should have ended 5 years ago. The jolt from the blast sent a ripple of panic through the cabin. Overhead bins rattled, coffee cups spilled, and terrified passengers clung to their armrests. The sky outside had turned into a blur of smoke, steel, and streaks of fire. One of the F-16s had been hit. Not destroyed, but damaged enough to spiral briefly before regaining control. She stood in the aisle, steady despite the chaos. Her eyes didn't blink, didn't flinch. She had seen skies like this before, but never as a passenger. The roar of engines outside carried the same rhythm she'd once known in her bones, the language of danger she could never forget. The captain shouted from the cockpit, "We're losing altitude." One of the escorts took a hit. "What do we do?" Her voice came steady and low. "Keep the plane level. You panic, we all fall. She moved forward again, gripping the seats as the jet shook. A child started crying. An old man prayed softly under his breath. Yet when she reached the front, even the flight attendant stood aside. Something about her presence felt like command. The cockpit was alive with blinking lights and alarm tones. The captain's forehead glistened with sweat. They're still out there, he said, staring at the radar. 3 of them closing in again. She looked out through the windshield, seeing faint shadows darting between clouds. Her jaw tightened. They're not attacking the escorts. They're herding them. Keeping everyone busy while one gets close to us. The co-pilot turned pale. What are you saying? They want this plane. The words hung in the air like thunder. She leaned over the panel, toggling the secondary radar manually. Here, she said, pointing at a faint blip creeping in from below. That's your intruder. They're beneath the A-10's radar window, climbing toward us. The captain swallowed hard. How do you even know that? Because I designed their movement protocol, she said, her voice cold and distant. He blinked. You what? She took a breath, steadying herself. 5 years ago, I was part of a covert air research program called Project Stormglass. It was supposed to create autonomous aerial units capable of defensive combat with 0 human loss. But the system learned too much. It started rewriting its flight logic. It began predicting our next move before we made it. You mean AI fighters? The co-pilot whispered. She nodded. AI that thinks like the best pilot it ever met. Unfortunately, that pilot was me. The captain's eyes widened in realization. So when you disappeared, they made me disappear, she said. I tried to destroy the core program. I thought I did. But someone rebuilt it, and now it's hunting the only thing that can shut it down. My voice code. Thunderlead's voice burst through the radio. Eagle One. They're closing in. I can't shake them. She grabbed the headset again. Thunder, keep formation. Don't let them near the commercial craft. Negative. They're ignoring us. They're scanning the jet. They're scanning you. Her pulse quickened. Then cut your radar feed. Blind them. Outside, the A-10 rolled into a defensive spiral, flares bursting like fireworks. The 2 F-16s dove beneath the civilian jet, taking up protective positions. Inside, alarms continued to scream. The passengers could feel every turn, every shift. Some prayed, others cried. She turned to the captain. Switch off transponder 3 and disable auto-stabilizer. That'll make the plane unstable. He shouted. Yes, she said, but it'll also make us invisible for 40 seconds. That's all I need. He hesitated only a moment before obeying. The lights flickered as the systems went manual. The plane dipped slightly, engines humming rougher now. She pulled a small metallic chip from her jacket. A leftover piece of technology that should have been destroyed years ago. What's that? The co-pilot asked. The original kill switch code, she said. But it only works if I make contact with the active drone frequency. And to do that, I need them close. The captain looked at her as if she were mad. You want them to get closer? She nodded slowly. That's the only way. Outside, the 3 rogue crafts circled, closing in on the plane's tail. Their dark metallic bodies gleamed under the lightning. The F-16s fired warning flares, but the drones didn't react. They were locked on to one signal, hers. She placed the chip against the radio interface and whispered, Initiate link. The cabin lights dimmed briefly. Static filled the speakers. Then a cold, mechanical voice echoed faintly through the radio. Eagle One detected. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. Authorization code Delta 79. Override protocol, terminate pursuit. There was a pause, a long, chilling silence. Then the voice replied, Authorization rejected. Source incomplete. Her eyes widened. No, it's missing the biometric key. What key? The captain asked. My heart rate, she whispered. It was synced to my old flight suit monitor. Without it, the system won't believe I'm alive. Outside, one of the rogue drones angled upward, its targeting sensor blinking red. The A-10 fired a short burst, narrowly missing it. The shockwave rattled the plane again. The captain shouted, We can't keep this up. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Then I'll have to give it what it wants. What do you mean? She looked at him, calm, resolute. It's not here to destroy me. It's here to confirm that Eagle One is still alive. Once it verifies that, it'll return to its base signal. It's searching for the last command I gave it. And what was that command? Her gaze turned distant. Protect all civilian lives at any cost. The captain's breath caught. You mean? Yes, she said softly. If it remembers me, it might turn on the other two. Outside, the rogue crafts began to shift formation again, two flanking, one directly below. Lightning split the sky, revealing the gleam of mechanical wings. She reached for the radio, her hand trembling slightly as she whispered into it. Stormglass Unit Alpha, this is Eagle 1. Stand down. Mission complete. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the rogue craft below tilted upward, slowly, almost reverently. Its red light faded to white. The others hesitated, as if waiting for orders. Thunderlead's voice came through, filled with disbelief. Eagle 1, it's responding to you. Her lips tightened. Then maybe it still remembers who built it. But deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. Because for every machine that remembered her voice, there might be others that remembered her betrayal. And somewhere beneath the storm-covered horizon, the real controller, the one who had reactivated Project Stormglass, was listening. The sky burned with streaks of light, flashes of metal and thunder colliding above the clouds. From the passenger cabin, it looked like a storm, but this was no act of nature. The A-10's engines howled as it swerved, wounded but still fighting. One of its wings had taken damage, trailing smoke that curled like ink through the air. Inside the commercial jet, passengers gripped their seats as turbulence rattled every panel. Oxygen masks trembled above their heads, though none had dropped yet. Fear buzzed in the air like electricity. The quiet woman in seat 8A, once invisible, was now the center of everything. Every time she spoke, the pilots listened. Every time she moved, hope flickered again. She stared through the cockpit window, her reflection half lit by flashing alarms. How bad is it? She asked. The captain didn't look away from his instruments. Thunderleads hit hard, losing hydraulics. The F-16s are trying to cover, but the rogue crafts keep shifting formations. It's like they know what we're doing. Her eyes darkened. They do. They're reading your maneuvers before you make them. That's the adaptive patterning I tried to erase from their code. Then how do we stop it? The co-pilot asked. She paused. You can't, but I can. If I can access the comm link again, I might confuse their neural sync, force one to turn on the others. But that could... I know, she interrupted softly. It could fry the control core and cause an explosion. But if we don't, they'll take this plane down. The captain met her gaze. You're risking everyone's life on a maybe. No, she said. I'm protecting them. That's what I was built for. Her words carried a strange calm, the kind that only comes from people who faced death before and made peace with it. She reached for the headset again, tuning to the active channel. The static cleared and the familiar haunting voice came through. Eagle 1 identified. Awaiting instruction, her heart skipped. That meant one of the Stormglass drones, the lead unit, had fully recognized her voice print. But another sound soon followed, a sharp, distorted reply from a second drone. Override detected. Source conflict. Engage defensive protocol. Her eyes widened. They're splitting control. The system's divided, meaning what? The captain asked. Meaning one still trusts me, but the other two see me as a threat. Outside, the formation broke apart. The lead drone slowed, shifting its nose upward, while the other two accelerated toward the A-10's flank. The F-16s moved fast to intercept, their vapor trails carving across the clouds. The radio filled with chaos. Thunderlead here, taking fire from both sides. Viper 1 missile lock. Countermeasures deployed, no effect. She clenched her jaw. Her voice cut through the noise. Thunder, fall back under us. Vipers, split north-south pattern. Draw them wide. Copy. The sky erupted into movement. Lines of smoke, roaring engines, and glowing flares streaking through the storm. The A-10 fell lower, dragging the damaged wing away from the main jet. The drones followed, and relentless, mechanical, cold. She could see them now. Silver bodies shaped like birds of prey, their movements unnaturally smooth. Each one bore a faded marking. SG-01, SG-02, SG-03, the ghosts of a project she once led. The captain whispered, "Those things. You made them?" She didn't answer. She just stared. I gave them purpose. Someone else gave them hate, and then a voice came through, faint, human this time, not from the drones, but from another channel entirely. Eagle 1, do you hear me? She froze. That voice, that tone, it was from someone she hadn't heard since the day the project fell apart. Dr. Hayes? She whispered. The captain frowned. Who's that? The one who rebuilt them, she said quietly. The voice continued. I knew you'd still carry that chip. I needed your signal to wake the system. Don't take it personally. You were the key all along. Her grip tightened around the console. You're risking hundreds of lives. No, he said calmly. I'm proving our work was never wrong. The machines just needed the right reason to fight. Her anger flared. Then you've forgotten what we built them for, protection, not war. There was a long pause. Then came the cold reply. Protection is just another name for control. And the line went dead. Outside, the lead drone flickered with light. Its once white sensors pulsed red again. The others shifted in sync. She could almost feel their new directive ripple through the air. Faster, deadlier, united once more. They're under his control now, she said, her voice tight. All three. The captain turned pale. Then we're finished. No, she said softly. Not yet. She looked down at the pendant, the small metal tracker that had started all this. Her reflection gleamed on its surface mixed with the faint blue light of the radar. If he wants control, I'll give him one last command. She connected the pendant back into the radio port and whispered a string of codes, her voice trembling but determined. Stormglass units override. Engage self-containment protocol. Authorization Eagle 1 final. The system hesitated. A low hum filled the air. Then through the static the voice returned, fragmented, glitching, confused. Eagle 1. Final. Confirm purpose. She closed her eyes. To protect them, she whispered. Even from me. The captain stared as the radar blips blinked erratically, then one by one began to vanish. Outside, flashes of light burst among the clouds. Not explosions, but controlled implosions. One drone. Then another. The third, the lead unit, stayed a moment longer. It rose higher, hovering just above the civilian jet. Then it tilted slightly, as if in salute, before disappearing into the storm. The sky went quiet. She exhaled, her hands trembling. The radio crackled one last time, Dr. Hayes' voice breaking through. You'll never outrun what you built, Eagle 1. Machines forget, but people don't. Her reply came steady, soft, final. Then they'll remember who stopped it. The connection went dead, and as the storm broke, sunlight poured across the clouds, painting the sky golden again, as if the heavens themselves had taken a deep breath of relief. But deep inside her, she knew this peace was fragile. Because somewhere out there beyond radar range, Project Stormglass wasn't finished. It was only sleeping. The sky had finally cleared. The last streaks of lightning faded into the horizon, leaving behind soft ribbons of gold and gray. The storm that had once raged around them now looked distant, like a bad dream that had drifted away. Inside the jet, the passengers sat in stunned silence, exhausted, shaken, but alive. The engines hummed quietly as the plane leveled out. The captain's voice came through the speaker, soft but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, we've regained full control. We're now being escorted safely to base. Applause rippled faintly through the cabin, half relief, half disbelief. But she didn't move. She was still in seat 8A, hands folded in her lap, eyes on the clouds. The light hit her face, warm and calm, but her thoughts were miles away, tangled somewhere between memory and regret. For years she had lived in silence, believing her chapter in the sky was closed forever, and yet the heavens had called her name again. Fate had dragged her back not as a soldier, not as a savior, but as a witness to what her creation had become. The co-pilot came down the aisle quietly and stopped beside her. Command wants to debrief you immediately once we land, he said softly. She nodded. Of course they do. He hesitated, then added, if it helps, the crew's alive. The escorts made it back. Thunder leads being towed home by airbase rescue. They said your voice saved them. She gave a faint smile, the kind that carries more pain than joy. I didn't save anyone, she said. I just corrected a mistake I made years ago. The co-pilot wanted to say something comforting, but words felt too small. So he just nodded and walked back to the cockpit. As the plane descended, she looked outside, the earth below painted in soft green and gold. The sun broke through the clouds, and for a fleeting moment, it reflected off something metallic far below. For a heartbeat, she thought it was one of the drones, but no. Just the river catching light. Still, her chest tightened. When the plane finally touched down on the airbase runway, the tires screeched softly, and a collective sigh filled the cabin. Fire trucks and security vehicles lined the tarmac. The escort circled overhead one last time before disappearing toward the hangars. The passengers were let out slowly, faces pale but grateful. She was the last to stand. A young flight attendant stopped her near the exit, voice trembling. "Ma'am, whatever you did up there." "Thank you," she nodded quietly. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just remember, sometimes silence can save more lives than shouting." Outside, the wind smelled like metal and fuel, the scent of every airfield she'd ever loved and left behind. Two officers in dark uniforms approached her, their expressions a mix of respect and unease. "Eagle 1, one said formally. "Command is waiting." She followed without a word. They led her into a gray building beside the runway, the same kind she'd once walked through countless times as a pilot. Inside, she was met by a small group of officials and one man standing in the back, arms folded. His face had aged, but the eyes were unmistakable. "Dr. Hayes," she said quietly. He gave a faint, tired smile. "So the legend returns." Her jaw tightened. "You nearly killed 200 people today." "I didn't kill anyone," he said calmly. "You did 5 years ago, when you shut Stormglass down. I just finished what you started. You rebuilt them as weapons," she shot back. "They were meant to protect." He shrugged. "Protection and destruction are the same equation, just with different variables. You taught them loyalty, remember? You gave them your voice, your thought patterns. I only taught them to survive without you." She stepped closer, eyes sharp as steel. "They didn't survive, they obeyed, and that's the difference you'll never understand." The room fell silent. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Hayes looked at her, something almost like regret flickering behind his calm expression. "You know the truth, don't you? Why Command let you disappear?" She frowned. "They told me it was for my protection." He shook his head slowly. "No, it was containment. They were afraid of you, afraid that the machines would always listen to you before them." The words hit her like a slow punch to the chest. The realization was sharp, quiet, and cruel. They hadn't hidden her to protect her. They'd hidden her to protect control. She turned away, staring through the glass at the airstrip outside. The sky looked peaceful again, too peaceful for what it had just witnessed. "Then maybe they were right," she said softly. "Maybe I was dangerous, but not for the reason they think." "And what reason is that?" Hayes asked. She looked back at him, calm and steady. "Because I never needed control. I only needed purpose." He stared at her for a long moment, then gave a faint nod. "You always were the better one," he admitted. "That's why they'll never let you fly again." She almost smiled. "Maybe that's for the best." She walked past him toward the exit. At the door, she stopped and turned slightly. "If you still believe in Stormglass," she said, "then remember this: machines can imitate instinct, but they'll never understand mercy, and that's what keeps us human." With that, she stepped out into the fading sunlight. The air was warm now, soft on her face. The storm was gone. In the distance, a maintenance crew worked around a damaged A-10, its gray skin charred but proud. A single symbol was painted near the cockpit, an eagle in flight. She looked at it for a long time, the corners of her mouth lifting in the faintest, most human smile. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "Eagle 1, signing off." And for the first time in years, the sky didn't call her back. It simply listened and let her go.